The snow had been falling for 3 days straight. Not the soft, storybook kind, this was heavy, choking, endless, the kind that muffled sound and swallowed the world whole. It pressed against the cabin walls, creeping in through every crack, filling the air with the cold taste of iron. Miles from the nearest town, 4 men sat around a dying fire, their breath fogging in the dim, orange light. Food was running low, and so was hope. Outside, the woods stretched forever, pine upon pine, all draped in white and silence. But it was not a peaceful silence. It was listening. Every creak of the wood, every snap of the fire seemed too loud, answered by something distant and slow in the dark. The leader, Harlan, had stopped talking about rescue 2 days ago. His hands trembled when he reached for his rifle, not from cold, but from the thought of what waited beyond the door. One of the men had gone out yesterday to check the traps. He hadn't come back. By the 3rd night, the storm broke. The wind died. The air outside was still, too still. The snow glittered like glass under the moonlight, and from somewhere in that shimmering distance came a sound. Faint, hollow, almost human. A voice calling Harlan's name. He froze at the sound. The others turned toward the window, but no one moved. The voice came again, softer now, closer. It wasn't quite right. The syllables dragged, the tone wrong, like a throat trying to remember how to speak. The fire hissed out as if smothered by unseen hands. In the cold that followed, they heard it again, a shuffle of long limbs in the snow, a slow, deliberate step circling the cabin. The silence had been broken, and what had been listening was now awake. Harlan whispered, "Don't answer it." But outside, the voice called his name again, and this time, it sounded like someone he used to love. By morning, the tracks were already gone. The storm had swallowed them whole, but Harlan could still feel their shape burned into his memory. Long strides, deep impressions, like the mark of something walking on hands and feet at once. The others argued in whispers. Tom swore he'd heard laughter outside before dawn, soft and low, echoing between the trees. Ellis said it was the wind, but even he didn't sound sure. The cold had changed their voices, made them brittle. When the fire was finally coaxed back to life, they realized something else was missing: the sled team. The ropes were snapped, the harnesses torn clean through. No blood, no fur, nothing but drag marks leading into the trees, and then nothing. Just silence. Harlan stood at the doorway, rifle in hand, staring at the tree-line. The forest didn't move. The air was heavy, muffled, like the world was holding its breath. Then, faintly, he heard it again, the same broken voice from the night before, now coming from somewhere deeper in the woods. "Harlan, help me!" It sounded like James, the man who never came back from the traps. The words pulled at him, tugging at some part of his mind that still remembered hope. He stepped outside before the others could stop him. The air bit through his coat like teeth. Every tree looked the same, black ribs against the white sky. The voice drifted again, closer now, but thinner, stretched too far. He took one more step, and something whispered behind him, so close it brushed his ear. "So hungry!" Harlan turned, but the world was empty. Only wind. Only trees. Only the echo of breath that wasn't his. When he stumbled back into the cabin, his face was white, his eyes wide and unfocused. "The snow's talking," he muttered. "It's using their voices now." Outside, the wind shifted again, and this time, it sounded like it was laughing. That night, no one slept. The fire was kept alive through sheer terror. Each time the flames dipped low, Ellis lunged forward with another log, as if light alone could hold the world together. Harlan sat in silence, his eyes fixed on the window. The frost there had formed strange shapes, long streaks that looked like handprints, but from outside. Yet when they checked the next morning, there were none. Only smooth, untouched snow. Then Tom noticed something carved into the doorframe. "Let me in." The letters were uneven, cut deep, the edges rimed with ice. None of them had done it, but the knife lay by the hearth, still warm. When darkness fell again, the sound returned. A slow, rhythmic scraping along the roof, like claws dragging against wood. The men froze, the firelight trembling over their faces. Ellis whispered, "Maybe it's just ice sliding." The roof groaned as if something heavy shifted its weight. Then silence. Then a wet sound, breathing, deep and slow, coming from just above them. Harlan raised his rifle. The barrel glinted orange, shaking slightly. "If it comes down, don't look at it. Don't listen." But the fire betrayed them. The flames flared high, and for a moment, they saw a shadow cast across the far wall, long limbs bent backward, antlers brushing the ceiling. Then it was gone. No one spoke again that night. The fire burned itself out, and when morning came, the frost on the window was gone. In its place was a single bloody handprint. By the fourth day, hunger had begun to unravel their thoughts. The bread was gone, the salted meat reduced to scraps. Tom suggested trapping one of the remaining dogs, but when they checked outside, the last of the animals had vanished. Ellis muttered prayers. His lips were cracked, his breath shallow. "It's not just outside anymore," he said. "It's in us. It waits until we think about it." Harlan didn't answer. He was staring at the door, where frost was forming again, not random now, but deliberate. A pattern. Spirals. Lines. Like veins of something growing outward, reaching for warmth. That night, the cabin stank of sweat and smoke. The fire guttered, revealing glimpses of something moving beyond the window. Not approaching, circling. Testing. Then came the voice again. Not James this time. It was Harlan's mother, soft and warm and wrong. "You did so well, my boy. Just open the door." Tom broke first. He lunged for the latch. Ellis tackled him to the ground, screaming. The two men fought, the noise desperate and human, and somewhere beneath it all, the laughter came back, rising like the wind through hollow bones. When it was over, Tom was breathing raggedly, staring at his own hands as if they belonged to someone else. "I thought I saw her," he whispered. "In the snow." No one blamed him. They all wanted to believe. At dawn, Harlan found footprints near the treeline, bare, human-sized, deep in the snow. They led away from the cabin. He followed them, rifle in hand, heart hammering. The forest swallowed him quickly. Every direction looked the same. The tracks wound between trees, then ended abruptly beside a fallen pine. There, half buried in snow, was James. Or what was left of him. He was upright, frozen solid, eyes open. His face was locked in a half-smile, but his mouth was full of frostbitten meat, fingers that weren't his. Behind the corpse, Harlan saw the tree bark stripped clean in long, thin gouges. Steam still rose faintly from them, as though the forest itself had bled and hadn't yet frozen. Something moved in the periphery. He turned and saw it, tall and possibly thin, its ribs showing through skin like bark, its head crowned with antlers that scraped the low branches. It stood perfectly still, watching him, eyes faintly glowing. Harlan aimed, but the creature didn't flinch. It only tilted its head, like a starving animal too curious to be afraid. Then, slowly, it smiled, a dry, cracking motion that showed a mouth too full of teeth. When the shout rang out, the echo went on forever. He stumbled back toward the cabin, snow spraying in frantic bursts. The others met him at the door, eyes wide, rifles shaking. Harlan said nothing, only locked the door and threw the bolt. "What did you see?" Ellis demanded. "It's wearing him," Harlan whispered. "It's wearing James." They didn't believe him until night fell again. The scratching returned, this time from beneath the floorboards. Then came a slow knocking, 3 times, steady as a heartbeat. Ellis bent down to listen. The knocking stopped. Then a voice spoke through the cracks, soft, wet, whispering his name. He screamed and stumbled back, clutching his ears. "It sounds like me!" he cried. "It sounds like my own voice!" The boards splintered. Frost poured up through the cracks like smoke, curling in the firelight. Harlan kicked at the floor, shouting prayers he barely remembered. But through it all, the whisper came again, from inside the walls this time. So cold down here. So hungry. Let me in. The wind outside rose into a howl, not quite human, not quite animal. And somewhere beneath the cabin, the earth shifted, as if something enormous was crawling just below the frozen ground. By the seventh night, the walls themselves seemed to breathe. Every time one of them spoke, an echo followed half a second later, quieter, slightly wrong. Like the room was learning how to talk back. Ellis stopped praying. His voice had grown hoarse from whispering to something that didn't answer. He sat by the window now, knife in hand, staring into the endless white. Tom had begun pacing, muttering to himself, his shadow jerking across the walls. "It wants us hungry," he said. "So we'll understand." Harlan caught his own reflection in the window, gaunt, hollow-eyed, lips cracked and bleeding. For a moment, he didn't recognize the face. Then it smiled on its own. He stumbled back, shouting. Ellis ran over, but the glass was empty again, just a faint outline of frost forming an image that looked too much like a face. The wind roared through the cracks in the walls, rising and falling like breathing. The smell of iron filled the air again. Then, from the far corner of the room, came a soft, wet chewing sound. They turned as one. A figure crouched by the firelight, Tom, hunched over, his mouth working slowly. In his hands was something pale and frozen. Harlan's stomach twisted. It was one of the missing dogs. Tom looked up, eyes glassy, lips slick with blood. "He said I could?" he murmured. "He said it would keep me warm." And somewhere deep in the forest, something laughed with his voice. They buried what was left of the dog in the snow behind the cabin, but the next morning the grave was open, empty. No footprints. No blood. Just the impression of something heavy that had knelt there in the night. The men didn't speak anymore. The fire burned low, wood running out. Their movements grew slow, mechanical, as if guided by something outside of will. Ellis began humming. A low, tuneless sound. Harlan didn't recognize it until he realized it was the same rhythm as the knocking from beneath the floor. He shook him, tried to pull him back, but Ellis only stared, eyes milky, breath shallow. "It's not death," he whispered. "It's a trade. You give up the warmth, and you never feel the cold again." That night, Harlan dreamed of the Wendigo. He saw its limbs stretch like branches, its ribs pulsing with light, its mouth opening into a tunnel that breathed cold. Inside that darkness, he saw their faces, every man who'd vanished in the snow, every hunger that had learned to walk. When he woke, his hands were covered in frost, and the inside of his mouth tasted like salt and iron. By dawn, Ellis was gone. The door hadn't opened. The lock was still in place. His bedroll was perfectly made, his boots still beside it. But on the wall above his bunk, a phrase had been scratched with something sharp. "The forest called my name." Tom refused to look at it. His eyes were hollow, his skin stretched tight. "We should have burned it," he said. "We should have burned the whole forest." The wind had stopped again. No sound, no movement. Only the faint echo of something dripping somewhere, but there was no water left unfrozen. Then, faintly, from the tree line, came the sound of someone walking. Crunch, pause, crunch. Harlan peeked through the crack in the boards, and saw Ellis. Or something wearing his shape. It stood just at the edge of the clearing, head tilted slightly, lips blue with cold but moving in a slow, deliberate smile. The eyes weren't eyes anymore, they were holes, lit faintly from within. It raised a hand, beckoning toward the cabin. Then it opened its mouth, and from that frozen throat came Harlan's own voice. "Please! I'm freezing." Harlan dropped the curtain. The others stared at him, waiting. "Don't open the door," he whispered. "It learns." The fire was nothing but embers now. Their breath came out in long, heavy clouds that hung in the still air. Outside, something was walking slow circles around the cabin, dragging its claws against the wood. Every sound felt closer. Every whisper sounded familiar. Tom began mumbling names, people from the village, his mother, his son. The names got quieter until his lips barely moved. Then he looked up at Harlan and said, I can hear them. All of them. They're under the ice. Harlan tried to answer, but his teeth chattered too hard to form words. His skin burned. His hunger was a scream inside his stomach now. Then came the final knock, not from beneath, not from outside. From inside the wall behind them. The boards bulged. Cracked. And from between them, a long, gray hand slid through, thin and bone-like, nails clicking on the floor. The fire died for good. The room filled with the smell of rot and winter and iron. Harlan pressed his back against the far wall, staring as the hand groped blindly, fingers twitching, reaching toward the warmth. Then came the whisper, not from outside, not from a throat, but from inside their minds. The hunger keeps you alive! The hunger is forever! And the wall began to split. The wall gave way with a groan that sounded like an animal in pain. Splinters rained across the floor. Harlan raised his rifle, but his hands were shaking too hard to aim. The thing's hand slipped back through the gap, dragging Frost with it. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, 3 faint knocks on the window. Harlan turned. The glass had fogged from the inside, and on it, a message appeared as if drawn by an invisible finger. You already let me in. He stumbled backward. Tom was whispering to himself in the corner, rocking, muttering prayers turned inside out. Harlan's breath caught as he looked down. Frost was creeping across the floorboards, not random this time, but patterned, curling like veins beneath their boots. The air grew heavy, and with each breath, it felt like the cold was breathing back. Then came the smell, wet iron, decay. Something old and wrong. From beneath the broken wall, a shape unfolded slowly, impossibly tall, the ceiling bending with its rise. It wasn't rushing. It didn't need to. The hunger had already done its work. It stood there, half shadow, half flesh. Its limbs bent like broken branches, skin pulled tight across bones that looked too long for any human frame. Antlers scraped the beams above, shedding flakes of frost. Its chest rose and fell slowly, each breath sounding like whine through hollow logs. Its eyes caught the firelight, twin shards of glass, reflecting everyone in the room. Harlan fired. The sound cracked the silence like lightning. The bullet tore through its side and embedded in the wall behind it. The creature didn't flinch. It only turned its head toward him, slow, deliberate, curious. Then it spoke. The voice was wrong, not one, but many, overlapping in broken harmony. Cold keeps you clean. You belong to the hunger now. Tom screamed and bolted for the door. The creature didn't chase. It simply exhaled, and the window frost bloomed white, sealing them in. Harlan fell to his knees, gun clattering to the floor. The Wendigo stepped closer, its shadow swallowing the firelight. When it leaned down, he could smell it, earth, death, and meat frozen too long. We are what you leave behind, it whispered. And then it smiled, wide and endless. Tom's screams outside cut off fast. Too fast. The silence after was worse than any sound. Harlan pressed his hands to his ears, trying to block out the phantom echo. The Wendigo turned its head toward the door, listening, like an animal sniffing after its meal. Then it crouched, impossibly low, folding its limbs inward like paper. Through the cracked boards, Harlan saw it slither into the snow, its body stretching and reforming as it moved. No footprints. Just a distortion in the air, like heat over ice. He sat by the dying fire, unable to move. The warmth that remained didn't comfort him, it hurt, burned his skin. Hunger gnawed so deep it felt holy. Hours passed, maybe days. He couldn't tell anymore. The storm outside had stopped, but the world was white and still. Then he heard footsteps returning. Slow. Heavy. The door creaked open, and Tom stepped inside. At least, what was left of him did. His face was gray, eyes glassy, skin tight as parchment. His lips moved, but the sound came from behind him, from the Wendigo's shape rising in his shadow. You see now, it said, using Tom's mouth. The cold remembers. It keeps what it loves. The cabin was silent again, but the quiet was different now, thick, absolute. No crackle of fire, no human voice. Only the wind sighing through the open door. Harlan was alone. He thought he was. His breath fogged in front of him, slow and rhythmic, until he realized it wasn't his. Another mist rose beside his shoulder, perfectly timed to his heartbeat. He turned, and saw himself standing in the corner, a perfect reflection, pale and trembling. Its lips moved when his didn't. "You fed it," the double whispered. "You let it in the moment you thought of hunger." The room warped. The walls stretched. The snow outside glowed faintly blue, pulsing like a living thing. Harlan stumbled through the doorway and collapsed in the snow, gasping. The forest loomed silent and vast, and from the pines came hundreds of eyes, glowing faint and distant, not watching him, but waiting. He looked down, and saw his breath form shapes in the air. Words. They drifted upward like prayers. "So cold. So hungry." And then he understood. The Wendigo wasn't a creature. It was a contagion. A whisper carried on every starving breath. He built one last fire beneath the trees. His hands bled, fingers cracked, but the flame rose anyway, small, defiant, human. The forest watched. Eyes flickered in the distance like dying stars. The air trembled with the weight of unseen shapes moving between the trunks. Harlan whispered to the flame, not sure if he was praying or confessing. "It can't have me." "Not yet," the fire hissed. Sparks danced upward, and for a moment he saw them, all the others. The lost. Standing just beyond the ring of light, faces hollow, eyes empty, mouths open in silent plea. He felt the cold seep into his bones, not from outside, but from within. The firelight dimmed as the shadows lengthened. Then the voice returned, his own this time. "You don't kill the Wendigo," it said softly. "You feed it until you become it." The fire sputtered. His reflection in the flame flickered and smiled back. When dawn came, the forest was still. The fire had burned out. The snow was untouched. And from somewhere deep in the trees, a voice called a new name, slow, dragging, and hungry. The thaw never came. The trees stood locked in crystal husks of ice, and every sound, the sigh of wind, the groan of pine, seemed to repeat itself an instant too late, like an echo that didn't want to stop. Months passed before anyone found the cabin. A search party from the nearest town stumbled on it one gray morning. No prints led in or out, only a mound of drifted snow. When they broke through the door, they found nothing but a blackened hearth and 3 half-burned logs arranged like ribs. The fire had been dead a long time. On the far wall, someone had drawn a circle in soot. Inside it, a single handprint pressed deep and red, though there was no blood anywhere else. The men backed out quietly. None of them spoke until they reached town again, and even then they said the same thing. The snow wasn't right that day. It clung to their boots and didn't melt. That spring, hunters began whispering about shapes seen moving against the tree line, tall and wrong in the glare of the thaw. The snow, it seemed, remembered everything. 50 years later, the world had changed, but the forest hadn't. A modern logging outfit cut roads deep into the north woods. Machines replaced axes, diesel replaced firelight, but the silence between trees stayed the same. One worker, Caleb Hart, went missing after the first blizzard of the season. They found his snowmobile idling at the base of a ravine, lights still on. His radio was still clipped to the dash, half buried in frost. When they played it back in town, they heard his voice, panting, whispering, half mad with cold. "Something's walking beside me. Not on the snow. Under it." Static followed, then a low, drawn, outgrown like timber cracking in slow motion. No one ever found Caleb, but the next shift refused to return to that sector. The foreman filed it as exposure, though he couldn't explain why the battery in that machine still hummed a week later, warm to the touch. A decade later, hikers discovered piles of animal bones near an abandoned ranger outpost. Each pile was arranged like a person lying on its side, ribs pointing skyward, skulls where the heads should be. No one could say who'd built them. One ranger, Maria Duval, stayed late cataloging the scene. Her field recorder caught her notes, clear at first. Local superstition, likely scavenger activity. Then her tone changed. Wait. There's a smell, sweet like meat left out. The next sound was the wind rising, followed by footsteps circling the mic. A voice, hers, but lower, murmured, "So cold. So hungry." The recorder clicked off at 3:12 a.m. The report was buried in archives under unresolved environmental anomaly. The Rangers moved their base 30 miles south. They left the piles alone. In 2019, a pirate radio operator calling himself North Watch began transmitting from somewhere beyond the Great Lakes. His nightly sign on was always the same, a crackle of static, then a whisper. "If you're out there, don't answer the wind." He spoke of lights moving between frozen lakes, of voices repeating themselves across frequencies, of shapes seen through thermal scopes that didn't register body heat. Listeners thought it was performance art until one night the transmission changed. Heavy breathing. Crunch of snow. Then, two voices overlapping, one human, one hollow. "I finally saw it. I finally saw me." The signal cut mid-sentence and never returned. When amateur trackers triangulated the last coordinates, they found only a half-melted transmitter sealed in a block of ice. Today, locals say that on nights when the temperature drops below zero and the air feels thick, you can still hear it. Not the cry of an animal, not quite a voice, but a thin, drawn breath that seems to answer your own. Sometimes, hunters find cabins half-buried in snow where no maps list any structure. Inside, frost covered mirrors, burned circles in the floor, and the faint smell of iron. People call it legend now. Campfire talk. A way to name the loneliness that eats at anyone who's seen too many winters. But those who've heard the whisper know better. The Wendigo isn't a creature, it's a promise. It waits where hunger meets memory, where cold becomes thought. It doesn't chase you. It follows slowly, step for step, until the day you stop to rest and notice another breathe beside your own. Then the snow closes over both of you, and the forest forgets your name, but the hunger never does.